Ladies and gentlemen, we just had one of the craziest final rounds of any chess tournament I have ever seen. The conclusion to Norway Chess after round 10 in 2026 was unbelievable. Wesley So and Alireza Firouzja are first and second. If either of them win their classical game, they win the tournament. Praggnanandhaa Rameshbabu is in third. He has an outside chance. His best chance comes from winning his classical game and these two making a draw. And so, let's look at their game. E4, E5, Bishop C4. Alireza with the white pieces. He started off this tournament with 2 wins. Wesley So had a phenomenal tournament, including beating Magnus Carlsen. But, I'll be honest, the two players, do what they might, just couldn't get anything going. We had a trade very early on. It was a bishop's opening. It was a very obscure line. Alireza playing some very dynamic chess. He gets his knight there. He's going for Wesley So's king. Wesley So, a very good defender, generally speaking, a very solid player. And they trade off the knights. And Alireza Firouzja's attack kind of breaks to nothing. They begin trading pawns. And after 31 moves, they made a draw. And neither player really got much. And so we move to Praggnanandhaa Rameshbabu versus Vincent Keymer. We will end with Magnus Carlsen versus Gukesh, and then the women's section. The only match to end in a draw today was that game I showed you between Wesley So and Alireza Firouzja. So Praggnanandhaa could win it all, or Vincent Keymer could prove to be the ultimate upset. D4 from Pragg, knight f6, c4, e6, and he plays knight to f3, and we get a traditional queen's gambit declined. We get e3, bishop to e7, knight to c3, short castles, takes, and bishop to d3. This has all been seen before. Vincent employs an interesting strategy of putting the knight on c6, which is not always seen. Often the knight will go there or out that way, and you'll put the pawn on c6 to help support your center, but this is a way to play. We get bishop to d6, short castles, rook to e8, or rook to e1, h6, and a3. And the players have obviously spent some time getting here, but nothing they've done has been remotely dynamic or interesting or not seen before. Both of them are playing as, the position has been played countless times. Bishop to e6, b4, a6, bishop to b2. It looks silly to fianchetto the bishop this way, but potentially you're going to liberate everything with the move e5. Black's pawn breaks are really difficult because with the move b4, you never really get c5 now. And so black kind of just has to wait around. And so Pragg definitely has a more dynamic position. He can definitely push. We get bishop d7. And there are always ideas of sacrifices over here, getting the queen in and getting at least a perpetual check. We get b5, looking to break. Takes. Bishop takes, pinning the knight. Queen slides over, and now the knight comes into e5, because that knight is still pinned, because there's a rook behind it. The queen's no longer behind it, but the rook is. And so bishop takes a3. It looks like Pragg hung a pawn. Takes. We take, and Pragg gets the pawn back. And this is how they've chosen to simplify the position after 20 moves. Pragg has to win this position to win the tournament, to win Norway Chess. Not gonna lie, this isn't the easiest position to win, simply because black has this kind of pawn structure that could be easily targeted. White's is very solid. So Pragg definitely has the better chances trying to target this. But it'd be better if he had like an outside passed a pawn or something. So he might win the pawn, but to what end? Everything's on the same side, and if you trade the wrong pieces, this is just going to be a draw. So queen d6, knight e5, rook c8. Like if black gets c5, and you get takes, everything's going to be pretty good for them. So rook b1, c5, but wait, knight b5, hits the queen. Queen goes back to f8, and now takes. Bishop over to f5, you might argue, wait, why aren't you taking this? Well, it's an interesting idea, but the problem is there's probably some tactics floating about. I'm just checking if there's a knockout blow, or it's just not the most accurate move. I'm just trying to think. Because, this isn't a fork, because everything takes. So the move here is just to go knight d4 back, potentially taking this bishop and giving your chance to the fork, but you can play a move like queen c8. So it's maybe just not the most accurate idea. Pragg decides instead, after d takes c5, to play bishop f5, throw in the attack on the rook. So when the rook moves, now you can take back with the queen, threaten a queen trade with queen to c1. And now when the knight comes back, it's not hitting the bishop on that square, and this bishop can potentially go back to h7. So knight to d7, check, and we get the queen trade, and now the bishop decides to go back to e6. And Vincent Keymer is perfectly happy to make this trade. Pragg doesn't want to do that. He plays rook b6, now potentially threatening to win a pawn, because after knight takes, pawn takes, the pawn would be hanging. And so we get rook f1 from Vincent Keymer. Sorry, Pragg was threatening to win a pawn. Pragg plays f4. h5 from Vincent Keymer is a blunder. Praggnanandhaa now has a winning variation. He finds it, check, king slides over, and he brings the knight back. And you might argue, what is going on? I don't understand how this is winning. I don't either, to be perfectly honest, because it looks so symmetrical. But the thing is, Pragg is always threatening to pick up this pawn. He kind of has safeguarded all of his stuff, and this could prove to be a weakness as well. Not to mention there are potential checks and mating attacks on the black king. So, knight to e4, f5. Where does the light squared bishop go? It goes to d7, but what about rook d8? Oh, you can go out this way? Well, now my knight's getting in. And the whole black position is falling apart. g4 is the final nail in the coffin, g6, sorry. Rook f8, the knight comes back to defend, it does not matter. Just by the way, look at this move, 96, because when you take, I take your rook on f1, and you come back, and Praggnanandhaa Rameshbabu not only wins the game by playing rook e7, he wins Norway Chess. He was in third place before the round started, and ultimately he picks up the victory. It did not matter what happened in the Wesley So Alireza game. They would not have accrued enough points, and so they will finish second and third in their game. Just going into the under games and to finish off the tournament, Magnus Carlsen versus Gukesh. Gukesh employing a Caro-Kann defense, and Magnus decided to play it like this, which is a really interesting line. Like, these two have not had the greatest tournament. They were occupying the bottom two positions, and frankly, it didn't matter what happened. I don't think either of them could have really improved their positions too much. Maybe Magnus if he won. As I said, there were no other draws, so one of the two players did win. And it was a very interesting game. Magnus down on time, which he has been for most of this tournament. He's not had a great time with classical chess of late, and it just looked like they were liquidating everything. But Magnus was ever slightly better. And ultimately, he ground Gukesh down in an endgame. It's weird that Magnus Carlsen is not like a front runner for one of these tournaments, but ultimately he wasn't. He didn't have a great tournament. It was the first time since like 20 years ago, like 2015, I want to say, if I remember the stat correctly, that he'd lost 4 classical games in one tournament, but ultimately he does end with a high, defeating the current sitting world champion. He trades down into a winning endgame, and this takes some winning, but the knight is too slow, and you've got to be careful, and here the knight finally is more or less trapped, and you will promote this pawn. And so it took Magnus 65 moves, but ultimately he defeated the world champion Gukesh. In terms of the women's section, we'll save the winner for last. Divya Deshmukh versus Anna Musachuk. It was a Alpin Sicilian. It was a very interesting game. Most Sicilians are. The Alpin is generally your best anti-Sicilian if you want to have a quieter game, but this was by no means a quieter game. Black was under pressure for a lot of time. Divya Deshmukh's games are never boring to watch. But she was on the thread of getting mated the whole game, and eventually she blundered, queen e5, and ultimately, it was really funny, because Anna didn't have the cleanest conversion, but ultimately, she was up the exchange, come everything, and then Anna Musachuk eventually converted, I believe. She had a massive advantage, and Divya Deshmukh suffering defeat in one of the final rounds. It was a rook versus bishop endgame, which is very tricky, but ultimately Anna Musachuk defeated Divya Deshmukh. Zuzhina versus Hampi Konaru. Hampi was unfortunately at the bottom of the standings for most of this tournament. She's had a really rough outing, but she is a very good player. It was, I don't want to say standard stuff. Standard stuff sounds horrible, but it was a Queen's Gambit declined. And for a large portion of this game, it was quite balanced. Black kind of had a weakness, but we got into bishop versus knight with queens on the board. Same pawn structure, just the e-pawn for black was quite weak. We didn't trade queens, did Zuzhina, and she just kind of ground Humpy Conaroo down. Humpy always had a slightly worse position, and she made one mistake here with queen g4. And ultimately it proved to be her downfall. There was a mistake. It wasn't the cleanest conversion from Zuzhina, but ultimately it was enough. Mistake there. It was really fun. There was a series here just after move 40 when they were both lowish on time. Zuzhina obviously had 14 minutes. So bishop e8 is a blunder. But a couple moves later, she blunders back to almost a draw here with queen e3. Her best move was f6. But she got the game back with queen takes f5. Queen c4 here would have been a more accurate move to just kind of stop everything happening, and this would have been the continuation of the line. But ultimately, she had a b pawn rather, that would have promoted me. And so the check, and then this pawn promotes. And the final game I wanted to show you was Bibisara, who already won Norway Chess women's section yesterday. She was playing the world champion, the reigning world champion Ju Wen-jun, who will be gearing up for her match against Vaishali Rameshbabu at some point. It was a King's Indian defense. It was a very interesting and dynamic game. It's a very interesting and dynamic opening. Ju Wen-jun has had a very interesting event because I don't think she's lost the classical game, if I remember correctly. She may have lost one. We'll check after this game. But she had a record where she had like 5 Armageddons and 5 Armageddon losses. And so they transformed the position. There were tactics flying all over the place. What ended up happening is they traded into an opposite-colored bishop endgame, but with rooks on the board. And Ju Wen-jun is a very decent endgame player. I mean, we saw that in her match against Tanjoni. And she transformed the position the right way, ultimately, and she defeated Bibisara. I just wanted to check Ju Wen-jun. So her games. So in this tournament, a draw against Divya. There's a loss here against... Okay, yeah. So draw in the classical game, loss on Armageddon. Draw in the classical, loss on Armageddon. Draw in the classical, draw in the Armageddon, but it lost because she had the white pieces. Draw, loss. Then she wins here the classical game. I'm just trying to check. Yeah. Oh, yeah, she lost to Bibisara. There's twice. Zuzhina's twice. Humpy Conaroo's twice. Divya she defeated in the classical game. Anna Musaschuk is there twice. Zuzhina was the only defeat in classical. So 2 wins in classical, 1 loss in classical. She lost to her Chinese compatriot. And Humpy Conaroo yesterday was her only win in Armageddon. So the classical world champion obviously having a very interesting tournament. Sorry, I realized the board has kind of broken a little bit. And then ultimately, there was only one game that went to Armageddon. That was Alireza Wesley So. It was, a repetition of the Bishop's opening. Wesley So had draw odds, but less time. We haven't really covered the Armageddons. I just kind of find them a bit of a lottery, and they weren't worth a great deal of points. There were several mistakes. Wesley So was better for a large portion of it. Alireza pushing for a win, and sometimes when you push for a win, you push for a loss. That's just what happens, and ultimately Wesley So won his Armageddon game, and so he secured second place. So it was a very interesting final round in terms of the standings, but ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, it is Praggnanandhaa Rameshbabu ahead of Wesley So, ahead of Alireza Firouzja at the final hurdle. He wins Norway Chess 2026 in a, quite frankly, phenomenal performance. Like, going back, he obviously wins against Vincent Keymer in the final round, but he had a very interesting tournament because, he lost to Alireza in the second round in the classical. He defeated Magnus Carlsen twice. He defeated Gukesh. He lost to Gukesh once and defeated him on another occasion. I just want to look here. He won his last 4 classical games in round, 10, 9, 8. So in round 7, he defeats Alireza Firouzja. In round 8, he defeats Magnus Carlsen for the second time. In round 9, he defeated Gukesh. And in round 10, he defeated Vincent Keymer. So 4 classical victories in a row propel him to the top of the standings. And that just shows you the scoring system of Norway Chess. It rewards you for winning your classical games. And so, almost out of nowhere, he wins it at the final hurdle. Congratulations to Praggnanandhaa Rameshbabu, who is having a phenomenal year outside of a iffy candidate's performance. But Gukesh, not a great tournament for him. He finishes bottom of the standings, and so he will have some work to do before his World Championship defense against Chokivar Sindarov later this year. So interesting times ahead for the World Champion and his challenger, because his challenger has replaced him in the Grand Chess Tour, which is a interesting side story, which we'll probably explore one day. Yeah, and that is the end of Norway Chess. Phenomenal event as always. Fascinating 10 rounds. Magnus Carlsen having a very interesting tournament, losing 4 classical games for the first time in many, many, many years. So we once again ask, is this the end of Magnus Carlsen? He's played a lot more classical chess this year than a lot of people would have expected. He played Taipei, he's playing Norway Chess. He might play a few more events in the year, I'm not sure. Obviously, there's less freestyle chess events that take up his time. He'll obviously be playing online events. He'll be at the Esports World Cup to defend his title. So we shall see if we see more of Magnus Carlsen in classical chess. It'll be interesting to see if we can get the best of Magnus back. That'll be really cool. But whether we see that, only time will tell. Let me know in the comments if you're seeing this in the future. Cheers.